Turning the attention to the defense now. I'll start along the defensive line. I want to see I want to see someone that's not named T'Vondre Sweat, Byron Murphy, even I'll throw Alfred Collins into that group. I want to see someone that's not any of those three guys step up and make some plays. Heard a lot of good stuff about the play of the defensive line this spring, but it's mostly been, again, because of those three guys, occasionally Sadir Mitchell. But I'd be happy with seeing Sadir Mitchell move some bodies, holding his gaps up front, moving well. I'd like to hear something from a guy like maybe like Chris Ross or heard good things from Aaron Bryant, Vernon Broughton. I would honestly probably say Vernon Broughton to me is the guy to watch along the defensive line. Maybe Sadir Mitchell. Those are two of the X factors in terms of the defensive line. Really
Definitely
looking good and having a lot of depth this fall.
Definitely. I mean, the three guys you mentioned off the rip they're going to be solid. Obviously, a little more question with Alfred Collins than there is for Byron Murphy or T'Vondre Sweat. But behind those three, it's going to be a question. I think Vernon Broughton's got to be that guy to step up. He's going to be in year 4. He was a high, 4-star guy coming out of Cy Ridge. I thought by this point he would be a wrecking ball and maybe even have earned a starting job. But it's been a little clogged at the defensive tackle position, and he really hasn't done anything to stand out. But I think he's a guy. I mean, he has the build, he has the athleticism. It's just about putting it all together. And yeah, I mean, I haven't seen like anything crazy coming out from practice about him, but I do think right now he would probably be kind of that 4th guy in the rotation. If he's getting passed up by Sadir Mitchell, I think that shows more of a problem for Broughton than how well Mitchell is playing. Because, I mean, obviously we know Mitchell's a behemoth of a human being, but he's still got to, shape his body a little bit, and it's his first spring on a college campus. Vernon Broughton's approaching year 4. So I think this is big, and it's going to be big for him on Saturday in the spring game to get in the backfield and kind of show he's there. I use that term for defensive tackles. You want your force, you want to be known. You want to make your presence known. You might not show up in the stat sheet with a lot of sacks or even tackles for loss, but you want to be pushing the interior offensive line back, and you want to let them know you're there. And I think Broughton can do that. But let's hope we do see that.
Absolutely. I think if there's, we pinpointed some upperclassmen earlier in the video that have made some big strides this year and, or this spring. And, Vernon Broughton was a guy among the upperclassmen that I would have liked to maybe hear a little bit more about this spring in terms of, developing, evening out his core strength, playing with better pad level. A lot of it's just technique and build for him. I think a lot of people underestimated how much of a developmental player he was coming out of high school. Even when I was covering his recruitment, I definitely underestimated it a little bit. I think everyone can kind of get lost in the recruiting ranking, but I do remember saying that he's probably not going to be an immediate impact player. I think I pinpointed 2 to 3 years, but I mean, I think this is 4th year on campus. So this is going to be a big week for him in spring. I mentioned Aaron Bryant. I think that could be a name to watch more in the fall. I don't think he's got like a ton to lose necessarily this week. He's still in his 2nd year, but he's had a good spring as well. I would probably say Vernon Broughton along the defensive line for me. Alfred Collins has had a big spring. The thing that I think will determine the pecking order of defensive line reps, not only this spring, but come the fall and, specifically in the spring game is how much 2-4-5, how much 2-down linemen or, at least 2 kind of true defensive lineman sets is PK going to play? Heard more about guys at the buck position lining up in the 3 tech in the last couple of weeks of spring, which is an interesting development to me. I mentioned this with Tarek, that I think that could be indicative of PK still or continuing to move in that 2-4-5 direction to play more of that true scheme. If that is the case, then I think you're looking more at like Vernon Broughton's probably like 3rd in the pecking order at defensive tackle behind T'Vondre Sweat and Alfred Collins. Otherwise, Vernon Broughton's going to be a pretty key backup if Texas is, running a lot of like 3 true down lineman sets. Um, edge rusher is an interesting one to me. Did you have anything else for the defensive line before I move on? Okay.
No, I'm good.
So edge rusher, edge rusher is like the position, like the most talked about position on the defense for the last 2 years. But, for me, it's kind of hard to pinpoint one player. Barron Sorrell's not going to be the guy that has a ton to prove this week. If he does great in practice, that's awesome. Love to continue to hear about his development. But I think for me, Ethan Burke is going to be the guy that I'm pinpointing. You know what? Actually, I'm going to change that to Justice Finkley. I think that Justice Finkley has already kind of lost some ground this spring in terms of the position battle at Buck, because Ethan Burke has passed him up for the first team reps. I think that Finkley has to prove that he can really step up as more of an impact pass rusher. I don't think Finkley is ever going to be like a stud pass rusher, like a double-digit sack guy, but his specialty is more of run defense. But, we know he can set the edge. We know that he can hold his gaps as a run stopper, but can he get after the quarterback? I think that's going to be a big question mark for him to watch in the spring game. I think he has more to gain and to lose than Ethan Burke, because I think Burke has already proven himself more this spring. I think for Ethan Burke, I've mentioned this before, but I think most of what I'll be watching for him is what he can do in summer workouts. Can he continue to add some weight? Can he continue to get in shape, use his length better, things like that? Whereas I think Finkley, he's really got to prove it on the field. So that's for me. But there's a million. It seems like there's a million ways to dissect the edge position.
Yeah. You did a great piece recently on hookupheadlines.com looking at 3 young pass rushers who are standing out in spring practice. I think your point about Finkley is interesting because he is a much better in run defense, but I do think he can turn into a serviceable pass rusher. But Texas really needs pass rush in the fall. Obviously, we all have high hopes of Barron Sorrell being a double-digit sack type guy, but it's not like he proved that last year. So it's not like you're bringing like a proven commodity back like Joseph Osai a couple years ago. But so that's where I think Burke could get the edge, where it's like we know that Burke can get after the quarterback, and if he doesn't get there, he's going to put up his 6'8" wingspan and knock balls down. So I think that's where Burke may have the edge. I do think this is good. I like to see these guys pushing each other, and I think it's good for the health and depth of the position moving forward. I think Burke is, correct me if I'm wrong, he's pretty interchangeable. Like he could play Buck or Jack, or is he pigeonholed either way?
He's been pretty versatile this spring, just in terms of like the number of different positions he's played. Because I think there were a lot of people that had him on the depth chart at Jack entering the spring. But yeah, he's been playing more of Buck, and Colton Voshik has been moving around too. I really thought it would be Ethan Burke at Jack and then Colton Voshik at Buck at some point, but they've been moving him around a ton. I think it speaks to me that they're just, you had mentioned it and I was kind of hinting at it, prioritizing pass rush. Whatever way they can get it done there. I would have liked to see a little bit more from Jamon Tapp this spring. It's a little discouraging that, knowing how like natural of a pass rusher he could be, that he might be the highest ceiling pass rusher on like among the edge players.
Yeah.
I
think that's fair to say.
Bledsoe and Voshik might have something to say about that, but Jamon Tapp's explosiveness and bend is crazy. So, I think Ethan Burke versus whatever offensive tackle he's facing with the first teamers is going to be a huge matchup to watch in the spring game. We'll talk more about like matchups and stuff like that though next week. You're right though. It's really, really interesting to see some of these freshmen or underclassmen duke it out, because game setting and the difference between the level of competition with the first, second, and third teams is quite drastic.
Yeah. I also think it's really interesting in today's day and age of the transfer portal. These battles in spring practice are the different, and this is not speaking in hyperbole, but I'm speaking on, the higher end of the spectrum. But some of these battles are the difference between, a guy spending 18 months in Austin and transferring, or a guy spending 3 or 4 years and turning into like an all Big 12 player, Longhorn legend type guy. So like these battles can be very significant down the line. And it's just interesting
Yeah.
now in the transfer portal era where, guys we were tracking on the recruiting cycle 2 years later, they're up and gone. So
Yeah, I mean, you could look at what if Tavondre Sweat had transferred when he was kind of lost in the shuffle at defensive line during his first 2 or 3 years on campus. Similar thing could be said for Barron Sorrell, if he didn't like the coaching switch and, maybe he didn't like the fit heading into his sophomore campaign. But, these two guys are staples along the defensive front now. You're totally right. It's interesting. Dre Bledsoe, I think, will be named to watch during the spring game as well. He's a guy that could be interchangeable between edge and 3 tech along the defensive line. I'm going to look at linebacker now because I think that probably is the second most interesting position group to me in the final week of spring. We mentioned David Benda earlier. I actually don't know how much I'm going to learn. Like if David Benda is just wildly out of place in this, I think for him, he just has to be formidable and consistent. Like, I guess a better word would be reliable in his spot, holding his gaps, things like that. Not missing reads. Like a lot of the things that we've hammered David Benda for in the last 3 or 4 years. He's been on campus since 2019, mind you. He's been around for a long time. His first year was with Todd Orlando. So, it's understandable why it's taken him a little while to, really find his spot. I think he was I've said this too many times this offseason, but I think he was miscast in his role, playing more as a middle linebacker in his first couple of years on campus. I think weak side linebacker is the best fit for him. But for me at linebacker, the guy that I'm going to be watching, actually, I'll name two because I think Mo Blackwell is a really interesting one. A guy that I don't know if he's going to end up playing Sam linebacker, kind of another rotational will linebacker this fall. I've heard lately that he's taking more snaps at will linebacker as one of the 3 first teamers, and that Anthony Hill might be the same linebacker this fall. That's an interesting development. I mean, for me, though, simply put, Anthony Hill is going to be the guy to watch for me in the spring game because I want to see, is he just blowing people away in the spring game? And, are we just going to see this massive rise from him during the fall? Or is it just going to take him a little while to get settled in with the defense? I think you could actually learn a lot from him. I don't want to get lost in the hype from a true freshman just having a big day and, really putting it all together. But I think it could show a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a chance, Hill can come out in the spring game and just really pop off the screen. And you're like, you see him move around the field and you're like, okay, that guy, you can tell he moves different than the other guys on the field. For Benda, you mentioned it. Obviously Hill has the higher ceiling. Hill's going to make the harder hits. He's going to, do all those things. But if Benda, learns gap integrity and is just always in the right place and, doesn't let up the big gain and kind of turns into a leader on the defense, that's super important too. And that could give him an upper leg as well at the will linebacker spot. You mentioned kind of being miscast on his position early on. That definitely set him back a little bit. And I think people have kind of thrown him out to pasture for that. But when you're learning another position, you can't really take into account the years you spent at middle linebacker. I know it's moving over, one spot, but those are different roles. So I think Benda, you mentioned Blackwell too, and there are obviously some other freshman early enrollee linebackers that'll be competing for depth spot. But between Benda, Blackwell, and Anthony Hill, I think the performance in the spring game could go a long way because I think this is kind of a fluid situation that's going to work its way through spring and into fall camp on just how these guys are positioned and who is in the starting 11.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I'm not going to take too long because we're already running up on time here. But, I think for David Benda, is he going to be, like you said, I mean, is he just going to be kind of a reliable guy at linebacker this year? Is he just going to be more guy or a guy to add more depth? Or, Is he going to kind of turn into, I guess, does he turn into like the Diamante Tucker Dorsey or like the version of Jalen Ford for the defense last year? I don't think it's going to be, I think it might be somewhere in the middle. I would probably stray more toward like the Diamante Tucker Dorsey route. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I honestly am more in the camp that like his rise this spring started last fall. Again, his skill set's just much better fit for weak side linebacker. And, I think we've seen that a little bit with like in highlights here and there and plays that I've heard about in scrimmages and team drills where he's had some really impressive chase downs. It seems like he's kind of had that DeMarvion Overshown effect on the defense where he's able to lead hats to the football and really let his physical tools do the talking. His sideline to sideline range is unquestionable. It's just, does he know where to go sideline to sideline? If his sole purpose is leading hats to the football, while guys like Jalen Ford and Mo Blackwell can do a little bit more of identifying and finding the ball, then I think that's the right role for him. But, like we said, is Anthony Hill just going to end up being a guy that still supplants him either way this fall? We'll see. My understanding of David Benda, and I'll sum it up this way, is that, his rise is great. He had a good run in winter S&C in the winter S&C program. He was one of the guys hitting the film room the hardest. And, that's kind of culminated in his rise this spring. But it doesn't sound like he's a guy that's really showing like all Big 12 type potential. So, it just sounds like he could be kind of a steady veteran presence at will linebacker that lets a lot of his physical tools do the talking. Maybe like a Gary Johnson type from like a few years ago.
Yeah, I think
interesting.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I agree with you there. One other name I think people might roll their eyes here, but I was reading some notes from Horns 24/7. They mentioned Jett Bush, who's been running with the second team as the middle linebacker, and he is in his 5th year, but only good news there. Obviously, he's not going to supplant Jalen Ford or anything, but when Bush does get reps, it seems like they're going to be solid reps. He obviously a strong, disciplined guy, knows what to do, and he's actually, built well. So I think just covering the Longhorns and as a Texas fan, you always get a little worried when it comes to linebacker because of depth issues that we've had in the past. So any little news and notes I see of other guys playing well is a good sign. I mean, there's obviously the younger guys. We don't even need to talk about them now, but I think the linebacker room is finally set up for success, not only in 2023, but, going forward.
Very true. I think you can thank landing guys like Tassili Akana, Leona Lafau, Samaje Burrell, a bunch of blue chips in the 2023 class that'll set up the linebacker room for success in the future.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to harp on linebacker anymore. I like that you bring up Jett Bush because one of the least sexy, but I think more important and underrated backup position battles entering the fall is going to be Mike linebacker between Jett Bush and Leona Lafau. Could be interesting to see. This has been one of my favorite position groups to talk about this spring is the secondary. I don't, so hard just to pick one guy to watch during the spring because you want to see this, you really want to see the secondary really culminate and show out strong in the spring game, especially given, some of the exciting new additions, whether it's Jalen Catalon, who, hell, I don't even know if he's going to play in the spring game. Malik Muhammad, we still have Derek Williams, Warren Roberson coming into the mix. So Gavin Holmes. So a lot of new additions and big risers. Keaton Crawford being the main one, but also the guy I'm going to pick to watch in the spring game is going to be Austin Jordan. I want to see where he looks best. He's been cross-training at Star this spring. We heard him as one of the more impressive players out of the gates. I think Keaton Crawford is going to be the name that a lot of people pick to watch in the spring game, and I totally get that. If he's finally able to be more than just this insanely fast and rangy, like basically a tackler. I know that's not a position on defense, but he's had a lot of trouble finding the ball in run defense, and he's had a lot of trouble sticking with routes in pass coverage. So, for me, it's going to be Austin Jordan. I want to see where he fits best if, he is going to be the next in line behind Ryan Watts at boundary corner, or is he going to be someone that can compete with Jalen Gilbo this fall to be the backup at star and, really be the next guy there behind Jahdae Barron. So.
Yeah, Jordan was actually the guy I was going to lean to too. I'll throw out another name out there, but just on Jordan, I was really excited when I heard he was going to be cross-training this spring at the nickel position behind Barron, because it didn't seem like the most comfortable fit for him at boundary. Obviously, he did get a decent amount of reps, and the one game that stands out to me was Iowa State when Ryan Watts went down, and Austin Jordan really just didn't look comfortable out there. I think it's kind of the nature of the beast when you get flung in there as a younger player, but I do like how the staff is kind of, mixing and matching and seeing where he fits best. We saw it with Anthony Cook. He's now gone, but moved around a good amount. Keaton Crawford obviously changing positions now too. So I like how the staff is not afraid to try out guys at different positions. So wherever they do end up, you can feel comfortable that, this has been a trial and error thing, and we feel that they've shown that they work best out of this position. So that'll be interesting to see how he plays at the star position. But I think just the battle the field corner battle in general is one that has my interest. You got Terrence Brooks, Gavin Holmes, Malik Muhammad, even Xavion Bryce has had a pretty strong spring. So I just think we've said this before on previous videos that me, you, and Tarek probably all think it's going to be Terrence Brooks in the fall. I don't know if you have any change of heart there, but I think that's going to be interesting to watch and see who performs well in these live reps where people are actually watching and it maybe matters a little more.
Field corner is one that I've been wishy-washy on because there's enough evidence for me to say that, yeah, Gavin Holmes for a lot of the spring has held down the first team spot at field corner. But in the last week, we've heard more about Terrence Brooks moving back into that role. I don't know. I think it's going to be between Gavin Holmes and Terrence Brooks in the fall. That's okay. It's going to be one of those two guys that's the third cornerback. Anyway, all of them are going to get a lot of reps. And Malik Muhammad, for that matter. So,
yeah,
I'm not worried about.
I agree with you there. It's almost splitting hairs because no matter who starts, they're going to be starter in name. But I think when you go back and look game by game, it's going to be broken down pretty evenly with who's out on the field. So,
and it seems like we always have at least one injury issue at corner, so it's going to be necessary to have depth there. Yeah. I'm excited just to see the entire secondary play. If Jalen Catalon's out and Jaron Thompson and Keaton Crawford are your two starting safeties with Michael Taft playing an important role, yeah, Crawford's going to be an important name to watch too. Do you have any other thoughts for the spring game or the final week of spring for that matter?
Yeah, I think we did a solid job of covering it all. I'm excited to stop kind of reading about this and actually get to see it. I think we covered it all pretty well.
Yeah, that's true. You make a valid point too, is, how much of it is real, how much of it isn't, you just kind of have to pick what you can and, see what sticks in the spring game. The last thing that I'll mention for the spring game that I'm interested to see if they do end up running a lot of special teams will be the kicking game. I don't like that I've seen some people mentioning, even in and around the program, mentioning the kicking game still as an uncertainty at times, because I thought Bert Auburn did a really nice job down the stretch last season. He was actually one of the highest graded place kickers in the Big 12. I don't know why that was necessarily a thing. So I'll be interested to see if that ends up being a concern in the fall. But
yeah, it's a valid point.
For me, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I'll wait to see if it's broken. You got any? I mean, just anything else you're watching for live? I guess I'd be asking the same question there. I said I would do a recruiting update here at the end. We're kind of running up on time here though, so I'll probably save that for a later video. I will say I've got a piece coming today that's pretty good. That's kind of diving into an evaluation of 3 of the newer priority targets. And maybe I'll do a video later this week accompanying that, but for now, I think we're set. But yeah, anyway, for Shane Black, Andrew Miller from Hook'emHeadlines.com, that's pretty much it. Welcome.